Hi, good evening, and welcome to A Moment with Vivacious. We have Mrs. Astrid Ross on with us today, and we're talking about the greatest subject that's on everybody's heart today, and that's educating our kids. So get your friends, and call everyone while we're doing the introduction because we need everybody listening in. Thank you for being here on a Saturday night when we're usually on Wednesdays, but we had some technical difficulties. But see you in a minute. Welcome to A Moment with Vivacious, a freedom ride where we the people gather to build ourselves, our family, our community, and our nation. For the sound of America for Progress has reached critical mass. Understanding that we must put aside our differences to focus on the greater good. This is a place of collaboration to rebuild and restore our nation. Welcome to A Moment with Vivacious. Hi, hello. Hello, Mrs. Astrid. How are you today?
Good evening. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. I just want to thank you for coming back a second time in 1 week because of the difficulties that we had. And I thank you for caring and thank you for all that you give in the school system and with our children. But we're going to start off with you introducing yourself.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Astrid Ross, and I am a local educator, a mental health advocate, and community leader. First and foremost, I'm a mom of 5 children. I'm a grandmother of 2, and education and mental health are definitely always at the forefront of my advocacy. And I just think that we're not having enough conversation. So I want to thank Ms. Valerie for again making sure that this message goes out, because this is a very late to the conversation subject that we're having. This is something we should have been talking about before this past election, because when we talk about the future of our children, we need to be a little bit more intentional and proactive. Now we're being reactive. So thank you again for allowing this topic for the show. I think it is something that people are not taking very seriously until it's a morning where your child has nowhere to go for education, and that type of inevitability in America when it comes to communities that depend on systems of education like the public schools, then it's going to be a very serious time. So hopefully, people get this conversation and get into that planning and intentional planning for their children's future.
It's such a strong conversation, encouraging. We were having a conversation today. I went to a meeting this morning, and this was like 50% of the conversation. It was education. What are our children going to do? As we spoke, well, the last I heard it was 22, but it's even higher now. In the world, when we were number one for years, our priorities changed. We stopped wanting to give our children everything. And, they have less value and less really boundaries and critical thinking. We're missing that a lot. If they have those pads, they have that internet. But I don't want to occupy that and take over the conversation. I want you to give us what is it that we need to do. We needed this a long time ago, but we're starting right here.
Well, thank you. Again, today's topic is school choice, but I think in order for us to understand school choice, we've got to go back to an earlier conversation, because what people are talking about right now is just the defunding of public school. So I think we need to go back a little bit further to see, what education was, how it served our communities, and what it is today. So when we talk about education, what was it meant to be? Right now, there's a big battle for the future of education in America, and the idea of school choice is being pushed in so many different ways that some see it as empowering, while others warn that it's a dismantling of public education as we know it. But before we talk about what's going on, we need to understand how we got here. And parents, educators, community members, this conversation is for you. This is not just for parents of school-aged children. This is for everyone, because the future of what our next generation looks like depends on this conversation. So let's get back to the beginning. Public education in America was supposed to be the great equalizer. The idea from people like Horace Mann, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Vision was that every child, rich or poor, black or white, would have access to knowledge, critical thinking, and the ability to pursue their dreams. Education was meant to be more than just job training. It was supposed to create an informed citizen, people who could think for themselves, people who contributed to their communities, and those that challenge injustice. But history tells us a totally different story. For us, for Black and Indigenous communities, education was never given freely. We always had to fight for it. From the fight to desegregate schools after Brown versus the Board of Education, to today's debate over banning books and rewriting history, access to real quality education has always been political. And now we're seeing a new shift, the rise of school choice. Charter schools, voucher programs, it is being sold as freedom. But is it really? Is it really freedom? Now let's fast forward to today, and we can see an education system that's deeply unequal. Underfunded public schools in the Black and brown communities. We have overworked and underpaid teachers leaving the profession. Standardized testing that prioritizes memorization over the critical thinking that we so wanted. And private and charter schools receiving funding at the expense of public schools without the same accountability. And parents are left wondering, what's best? What's best for our family? What's best for my child? So, some say school choice gives families choices and options. Others argue that it drains resources from public schools and deepens inequality. The truth, both can be true at the same time. When we talk about advocating for children, we have to advocate for their families first. There is no success in a child without their family. So the family has to make the choice in what's best for them. The family, again, I'll repeat that. The family has to make the choice on what's best for the child. School choice includes how do the families, again, survive. That's a part of school choice. We've got to have parents who can be able to, fund the family as a project. We've got to be able to pay for housing. We've got to be able to pay for food. All of that is school choice. So the parents' choices for their child also includes how they will survive as a family. School choice also includes what the culture of the community looks like, because we all know that when you go to different public schools in different communities, the culture of that community dictates what that school looks like. Like, I'm in Berkmar country. Berkmar country is a lot different than Brookwood country, and GCPS schools, the culture, it really is dependent on the demographics of that area. What does that school's diversity look like? What's the feel and the culture of the school when you walk in? Is that reflected in the representation of the staff? Does the area, the environment look that way and represent for the student body? So that's, all those things have to be considered and given as a part of the school choice for a family. Because again, if I was a culture of an African American and I had children I wanted to put in the school system, I wanted them to feel culturally safe, and that, in that school, there would be some cultural competence so that they would feel comfortable enough in that environment to have the ability to learn. So, school choice that's what true child advocacy is. Just not fighting to keep public schools open. We have to make sure that we have all viable options for families.
Yeah.
School choice is about objectivity, not subjective, because I have to keep objective in this conversation, because I don't want to be a hypocrite, because I'm a parent that has used every option. I have 5 adult children. We have done homeschooling, we have public school, we have private school. We've even done foreign exchange student program where my sons had the opportunity as young African American boys to experience a foreign country on a foreign exchange student program, going to an African country, so, and for a period of time that worked for us. So for school choice, what that family chooses as a mode of education for them that works and is successful, that has always been the formula. I have people that tell me, I've been in education a little over 30 years now, and of all the things that we have done, we have children that have excelled very high. We have a doctor, we have 2 with bachelors in psychology, we have one that runs a for-profit for mental health, and my youngest daughter is on her 2nd degree, so they are high achievers. But when people ask, what do you think produced that? And to be very honest, I can't, there's no one thing that we think that produced their high achievement. I won't take their own efforts away, but what also helped them get there was a supporting family. Because when we homeschool, there was no playing around with homeschool. We were getting up, we were going to the library, we were going on field trips, they were doing essays, we were reporting attendance to the state, we joined homeschool groups, and when I was public school parent, I'm PTA parent, I was in the school building. Teachers knew my face. They had emails from me. I connected with the school. And the same thing as a private school parent. And, I made sure, again, that we're supporting that school environment. So really, when we talk about school choice, and again, this is going to tie into, what the lay of the land is right now and the anxiety that parents have. They don't want to hear school choice right now. So while the DOE is dying and burning, no one wants to be told there are other options for education, and that's kind of what makes me shift from now the educational advocate now to the mental health advocate. Because with school choice, when we talk about what our children's futures look like, we want, again, as parents, to be able to talk about it in a safe environment. Right now, it's not a safe environment for families. Right now, it's a very unsafe conversation. We have uncertainty in our futures. And when their futures feel unsafe in the parents' eyes, and I don't even have young children, and I have an angst about what this next children's generation is going to look like, in the midst of all this instability. I shift from educational advocate now to mental health, because I just want to give all these parents a virtual hug and say, it's okay. There are other options. It is going to be a hard it's going to be a hard, turn on this one, because again, we are not talking about specifics in this administration, but what we see in this administration is cruelty. We see evil in what we're looking at right now. This is not real leadership. I have on my desk where I do podcasts, and we talk about social studies, we talk about civics, and we the people, what you guys are seeing right now in the government does not exist right now. What we're seeing is something much more nefarious. What we're seeing right now is something that's subhuman. We are seeing leadership in its worst form. Are they leading us? Yeah, off a cliff. So yeah, by the loosest definition of what leadership can look like, yeah, you can lead ducks off a cliff before you have a safety net for them. So for those of us that are going to follow them off the cliff, go right ahead. But for the rest of us who have, again, been disenfranchised, been disappointed by leadership, that have, again, as we say, 2 generations back, bamboozled, we kind of peeped the game and what's going on. So this is, again, why I want to give that virtual hug to families, because it's going to be all right. Because our grandmothers found a way to survive and get us through, and it was okay. And then our mothers found a way to get us through, and that's okay. What we're missing right now is that communication of history to this new generation, to these new parents. You know, we learned so much in the church before we even got to public school. You know, we had a conversation, me and Miss Valerie, about we still are having social promotions where kids are coming out of high school and they can't read. You know, we were going to read. You were going to read the encyclopedia, the Bible, the dictionary. You were going to read something. That Sears catalog, you know, so that was back in the day when the community had charge of their children's education. And I know this may be a controversial thing to say, but when we heard this new captain of the ship say, I'm giving you your kids back, you know, I sat back and said, thank you. You should have never had them in the first place. Because you
Exactly.
all did not have our children's best interests at heart. The system has been broken from the beginning.
Yes.
From the beginning, we've been suing for equality. It has been broken from the beginning. You didn't take anything away. You pulled a raggedy crap you've been giving us from the beginning. You pull that back. So again, this is not new to us. This is the disconnect in history. Go talk to your grandma. You don't have a grandma? Go find someone's grandma, someone's person, human who was here 4 decades ago, whose communities had to step up. Okay, this is the disconnect, because we're now getting the anxiety is that the angst is we don't know what to do. Yeah, we do, because our grandmas did it. Our grandfathers did it. You know, the communities rallied around where, again, our money started to circulate in our own communities. You know, we felt we had safe haven and there was protection. So as we're seeing this, you know, we don't get fooled about what you're seeing. This is not about Democrat or Republican. This is not about white versus black. This is not even politics. What you're seeing is downright evil. You know, for those people who have any type of spirituality, you don't pull the wings off a butterfly and watch it struggle. You don't take a crutch from someone and watch them crawl. This is not what we're looking at. So we need to boss up as black folk. We know what that feels like, and we know that evil that comes enveloped in politics, enveloped in leadership. This is not what that is. You know, and our grandparents, these OGs who were down with that program and down with that struggle and knew what that was about, that whole thing of coming out of Jim Crow. See, our great grandparents and grandparents understood Jim Crow. Us young people, we don't, because we got a little lull and a little bread and circus enough for us to be disconnected from the evil that we're seeing right now. You know, to defund the supports that people live on and not have anything to put in its place. Knowing that people's lives, not just their livelihoods, some of them, their lives depend on these supports. You know, talking about rolling back 504s where kids can't get insulin shots and, you know, get help if they get a bee sting and they're allergic to it, or get their asthma pump at 10 o'clock. When you take that kind of stuff away, or even threaten to take that away, that's not politics and leadership. You know, so I know we're talking about it within a system, but we got to get back to the human system, because we have my grandma, who raised y'all? What are we seeing now? You know, and I think that's what's kind of confusing and shocking to us, because we were kind of discombobulated because evil showed up, and I was like, oh yeah, that's what okay, all right, yeah, okay, I know what we're looking at now. So we need to snap out of it really quick, okay? Everything now is flipped upside down. All the things that we thought we were planning for, and factory and industrial, no, put that to the back, and it's time to pick up those lessons that our grandparents gave us. The ones that we thought we wouldn't have to use, the ones that we thought we had transcended above. Oh, we're educated. We're back to basics. They hating on us because we brown. You know, so yeah, put them degrees down. Go to your communities. There's so many things, some things that I did not mention that I will mention now about what can we do now, you know, because it's time to get over the outrage. It's time to stop being surprised. Yes, they did take away, if your child is autistic and you're depending on money from Title I, Title II, Title IV, or supports in certain things, they take that money away because they want your child to struggle. They have no replacement. So what you need to do, don't get upset. Just like I said, get your kids back. Okay? Monday morning, I know in some of the counties right now, even in the metro counties, it is spring break. But when school reopens for a lot of these schools, show up at school. Get a copy of your child's full transcript, student records. What you can do after this podcast, go to the state's website for education before it disappears or gets taken down.
Yes.
Go look up georgiastandards.org. If you have a child in third grade, you can go right after this podcast and go to georgiastandards.org and see an entire list of what your child needs to know for the entire third grade year for English language arts, math, social studies, and science. It's going to be right there. You can pull it up on your phone, on your laptop, download it, and print it out. There's ways of accountabilities that parents can have by knowing we have to get our community's education back in our hands. So we won't underfund our own babies. We will pour everything into them. Because as a homeschooling parent, I think I spent more money on my kids than I spend on them now, because I wanted to make sure they had things that we didn't have. So we need to not be afraid of conversations like homeschooling. We need to not be afraid to have conversations like pulling my child out of public school. We would love for public school to continue, and because it serves the most, there's so much value in public school. I have people ask me all the time, why are you a proponent or an advocate for public school? I'm an advocate for school choice, which means that families need a choice. Private school, which is where I've worked for the past 2 decades, is not a choice for everyone. Every family can't afford it. Sometimes public school has to be their choice, and then they can be very engaged and connected to make sure that they are supporting their child's learning. And with some families, they can't do either. They want to homeschool, and they have the means, wherewithal, and the desire to do it. So the best option for families is the one they choose and they stick with and support 100%. One thing that we can do collectively as a community, even if you don't have children, go to the next school board meeting in your county. You can look that up as well. Add Siri, go to Google. Well, where's my school board? Where is it located? When is the next school board meeting? It's open to the public. You get to see how schools are being managed in your general location. Those kids in that school and what's going on in that school board meeting, that's your next generation. That will determine what your entire community looks like in one generation. So if you're interested to see what's going to change and everybody's looking at stocks and property values, no, go to the public school. Those are the ones who are going to filter in there, and that's the demographic of what that community is going to look like. Because the more support that they get, the better the schools are, the better a neighborhood holds up. Because schools that start to deteriorate, there's a correlation between property taxes and school. And when that property starts to drop and the schools drop, that's what your community is going to look like. And you don't want that. And even if you don't have kids, community members can still make sure that schools have that support. So, the first thing we can do for that next generation is local support and control over our schools. So show up.
Ms. Jess Moore, 33, says, I absolutely agree. Thank you for this.
Welcome. Very, very welcome. Another thing you can do, again, we live in the state of Georgia. Georgia is a homeschooling state. We still have the right to have our children educated in that manner. And there's a criteria that they set for parents on who's going to be a homeschooler. It's a low bar. Parents only need to have a high school diploma to homeschool their own children. And then there's some other criteria for homeschool programs of those that provide that direct instruction for children. And that, again, for a lot of parents, they want to do that. We chose to do that with our children who were very advanced at a very young age. And I had a 5-year-old who was reading fluently in a public school that none of the kids in the classroom were reading, and they were reluctant to even look at acceleration. We chose to do that. But that, again, requires intentionality because, a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old at home, you got to be ready to say, okay, we're going to have a schedule, we're going to have structure, because again, that child is going to be 100% representation of everything you pour into them. The more structured and disciplined you are, the more knowledgeable you are, that's what you're going to produce, in your children. So, I've seen very successful homeschoolers and I've seen some lazy homeschoolers. So, please make sure that, if you're pulling your kids out because you're complaining about what public school does, and then you bring them home and then you're cheating their time and efforts as well. Again, this is why I say school choice means parents 100% intentional and making sure that what they are doing and supporting is the best for their families. So there's one more thing, and again, this is a benefit of taking our children back, as you say. Some things that we never got a chance to do or never got a chance to push: entrepreneurial, financial literacy, and African American studies or cultural studies. These are things, again, that some of our children have to wait until they are in maybe high school or post-secondary college to actually get access to that type of instruction. These are things that you can teach your children right now. They may hear 5 or 6 historical black leaders in America. You can teach that to a pre-K student. So that gives you, don't wait or let the schools be the only teachers for your child. Okay, part of what we're dealing with right now is because we didn't learn enough history, number one. Part of our problem with voting and not having enough voting literacy is because we didn't like social studies. We didn't like these stories. We stopped listening to our grandparents. If you hear that your grandmother had to stand in line for 10 hours just to get registered to vote, or if your great-grandfather was attacked because he wanted to, exercise his right to vote, those stories now become real life. Okay, it's not just, oh, I can do it if I don't want to. But if you know the struggles that we had just to have that civil freedom, then we would exercise that more, especially now that the evil is trying to take it away. Okay, so all of this bad stuff that we're getting outraged about are unique opportunities for you to step back up and get to work, as they say, get to work. Don't be upset about what he's closing. Did you know that he could close it? Did you know how to close it? Did you know how to stop it from being closed? So these, again, get in where you can. Get in where you can. If you don't understand what's going on, go take an online civics class. If you don't know that he can't completely close the Department of Education, but he can defund it, go look it up on YouTube. I mean, there's ways that we need to get educated really quick so that we can come up with strategic planning so that by 2026 that we can make some transformative changes off of all this stuff, this dumpster fire that we see happening. Did you know that we don't have to wait an entire 4 years to change out this administration and have some power? You know that next year in some of the local elections, no, a lot of people don't. So this is why, again, we need to get educated. The conversations about the Department of Education, again, what are parents going to do if those schools can't pay their teachers or the schools now can no longer operate? What do we do? It is time to get on board. It's no longer time now to try to figure out what's going on. It's time
to fight by the teacher. We got to get away from that. Stop fighting by the teacher. We must become one with the teacher.
Yes.
Miss Jessmore 33 says, school board meetings are so important. I wish more parents showed up. I learned when I decided to opt out of Georgia milestones for my son in 5th grade. I wish I had this info back then.
Yes, we don't realize how much partnership that needs to happen for parents, because what we have done, and I only say this because I see this too frequently with a lot of families, and it's not intentional. It's because a lot of our families that have to use public school may have only one income in the home, and they depend on public school being the one hitter. I just need them to do right by my child because I got to work. I don't have time to stop in for conferences. I don't have time for PTA meetings. This house is running on this one income, and I'm depending on them to do right. So the thing is, they ain't never been right. And I hate to say that or to, fear our parents, but they haven't been. It has been a lie the whole time that it has been the best thing for our communities. It's just the most of what our community. It's not the best. It's not the best. It is the biggest provider of education in America. Okay, and let me put this into perspective. I'm in Gwinnett County, and Gwinnett County has about 180 plus thousand children in that school system, the largest school system district in the state. That's a lot of kids. So we're talking about the most children, they collect the most educational data, so there is value in making sure that the systems are in place. But when you underfund a system, then the system is broken, like every other system in America that we can get into in different podcasts, like the healthcare system. We talk about systems as if they're absolute and that they work. They don't work. Again, I thank this administration for waking us back up because we were too dependent on the things that didn't work. So, we don't get upset when they take the broken hoopty back and we back on MARTA. Okay, let's get back to MARTA because that could have saved your life. Or at least now that could give your children an alternate future that you now have absolute control over. Okay, so, take this as a unique opportunity right now to teach them, especially civics, because you failed it. I failed it. Our generation failed civics because look at where we are today. We fought for so long for so many things, and we didn't know how much power we had. We had the power to not be where we are today. I know that's a whole nother conversation about what we could have done if we were more engaged, if we had more people show up to the table, if we had a different message coming from Democrats, if we understood, what the playbook was. That's a whole nother conversation. But again, when it comes to education, this unique opportunity to teach our children that don't trust Republicans. I don't know where that is in the social studies curriculum, but if you have now control over your kids, let it be known that they don't have your best interest at heart. And that it can.
Astrid, and this is one thing with Vivacious Speaks that I say over and over and over again. Democracy is people power.
Yes.
We have to not, like we gave these people our total dependency on them for our kids. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, they feed them trash anyway, okay? Fix them some breakfast. But that's me, everybody can't do that. And I'm understanding life is different now. But we've totally given everything over to somebody else to do. And I'm all for it. Like you said, take our children back. I am all for taking our children back. Getting a lead, like you said, call. What my child supposed to be learning now? Why aren't they learning phonics in third grade and second grade? Why aren't they learning phonics? But did we even know about phonics? I came from private school. And I sent my child to private school, so I don't know how public school works. My sister would be able to see, but we had phonics. And because I knew we had phonics, I'm sure they had phonics in my daughter's school, but I taught her phonics. But now we're at the point where we have even grandparents that's raising kids. We have, like when I taught in the late 1990s, there was social promotion. And now these are the parents that have kids. So can you tell us how can they help their kids because they don't know?
Right.
Is there a way that they can help their kids or try to learn?
Well, the first thing, as I said, first things first, we need to put everything into perspective. Where do we rank? Okay, because again, this is all about awareness and transparency, because we were always sold this lie, and this is something that we hear way too often now. We're the greatest country on this planet. We're the greatest thing ever. Math and science were 27th. Okay, in a race, 27th, that ain't the greatest. Okay, so we put that into perspective. We are one of only, I think, 3 countries on the planet that doesn't use a metric system. Out of all the countries on earth that are advanced, we're not even on the metric system yet. I think we're still down with another country in like Liberia or something. So putting the things into perspective, and in the state of Georgia, I think we're about 20 something in nation ranking for education. So if you are 27th in the world, 27th in the nation, and depending on what county you're in the state of Georgia, those counties have rankings as well. Now we come to, what is my baby going to be? So once we put ourselves into perspective in the real world, objectively with data, now we have to look at, okay, this failed system now is breaking apart. I may not even be the most competent now to get my child where I want to be, because I get that conversation all the time as a principal. I have parents who ask me, I want a gifted child. I said, well, are you ready for this role? Because the gifted child comes with a partnership of school, parent, and what that child may have the capacity to do. So that takes a lot. So looking at where we're ranking as individuals and where you want your child to be, okay, now this is where the conversation starts, okay, because that means parents who are disciplined. So again, we talked about, the school choice. I still want to make sure that, the audience understands. We understand how difficult a lot of this conversation is, because a lot of families that have children in public school have to have them in public school because financially they can't afford private schools. And parents that may be just one income in the home, they have to work. So these conversations bring angst, and they want public school to continue because they can't envision not having an income come in. This is why these conversations are so very important, because you may not have a choice if that school closes. This is not just about you pulling your child out of public school. That school may no longer exist. Schools may have to consolidate. Class sizes may get larger. You have to think about what the inevitable is and what your possible options are. Your families are having to be critical thinkers before the earthquake happens. We hear the tremors are happening, okay? Don't sit back and wait and think that this time next month you're going to scramble and figure out, oh, I got to figure out what's going on with my 3 kids. Their school just closed and I got to go to work. We need to be critical. What are some possible options? What can we do? Because there are options. Our nonprofit does help with consultancy for homeschooling. There are options even for private schools for families that don't have large incomes. There are vouchers. There are scholarships that families can apply for. There's even state funding through Georgia SSOs that can provide scholarships and funding for parents that have low incomes. And again, get connected to the school boards, because again, the communities could also support, because with the DOE closing, only about 20% of that funding came from the DOE. So those schools are still going to struggle to stay afloat. So for those that can stay afloat and those that can operate, without all that special funding that was reduced, then, you're going to want to still stay connected. Because even for, the Black and brown kids in those schools, if things like language services was removed, or IEP funding, or 504 funding, or those fundings, or, special needs teachers were reduced, you're going to want to know what's going on at that school and what services that your child still can get in that school. And again, it's just about that again. Take your kids back. Take them back. 100%. Where that means I am now being fully aware of what is the next step for my child's educational future. Even if nothing changes in the mode that you have it, you now are saying I'm being intentional, because they just rock the boat. You don't rock my baby's future without me being like, whoa, give me that
Right.
steering wheel. You ain't doing this with my child. Telling me what they gonna get, what they not gonna get, what taxes I pay, and I'm like, whoa, hold on, Nelly. So grab these reins, okay? Don't take offense to what he said. Just do it. Get your babies, and now chart the steps out intentionally. Okay, this is just a blip in our historical timeline, and like I said, we've been here before. We've made gains that they pull back. We've made gains that they pull back. You know, we again, I think the only reason we're here, we disconnected from our ancestors. We didn't listen to our grandparents. We got complacent. We got to that $20 an hour, and we thought, oh, we up there with the big dogs now. You know, we realized that they can Thanos it all back. He
But
got
somebody's
all
giving
the
it.
jewels.
If
Yep.
you have a job that's giving you that, it's not yours. They will
Right.
pull it at any moment.
Yeah.
And
We
that's why I try
forgot.
to keep myself out of job mode, because they can
Yes.
pull it at any moment. And I want to talk about, were we finished before I move
Yes.
on?
Well, just one more thing with stuff that you
Go
said.
ahead, please.
We forgot that collectively, as a people, black folks, we only have 1% of wealth in America. All that since Jim Crow, all this forward progression and civil rights, and we still have less than 1% of the wealth. Okay, we always need to come back to the objective data to see what gains have we really made. Okay, so I'm sorry, that kind of puts it's a dismal fact, but it just reminds us, hey, we ain't hustle hard enough, you know. And what have we done with all this hustle, you know? And obviously, with 1% of the wealth, the education has not served us well at all. We thought we got smart, but we gained no wealth. So what did the education afford us? Okay, so let's get back to the educational board for our children, because I don't want to put out a whole new poor generation of children. And if that means that we're supporting these broken systems, that it's going to put another generation of my great grandkids now who still have no wealth in this country, then yeah, we need to talk about, we need to talk. Let's put it that way. We need to talk. We need to
And
talk.
I look at the situation, and I don't want to get off of education, but to include Ralph a little bit, our grandparents and parents took pennies and nickels to buy land, and we're talking about reparations, but all of the suffering and sacrifices they made to purchase homes and buy land is just going away with the generation, with this generation. We're not taking care of what the wealth that they provide for us, not understanding how land is the greatest wealth.
Yep. Yep. Well, I think this was the whole problem. This is the problem. And the education that we're talking about, this is the only one that matters. Because for the past, I think, 2 decades, we've only pushed STEM education. We pushed science, technology, education, and math. Engineering and math. We didn't push civics and government. We didn't push social studies, geography. We pushed the things that kept us from 1% to 1%. Okay? They didn't help us. They helped our nation, because we've seen our nation get richer. We've seen the factories evolve. We've seen the industry evolve. We've even seen the STEM fields evolve. But as a community, the ones who right now are getting their resources removed, it didn't afford us. It didn't benefit us. So the only education I'm talking about right now is cultural and civic education. Because talking about reparations will only come until we become the people again, or at all. Maybe we've never been the people. If after all this experiment, this American experiment, and we still, as a people, only have less than 1% of the wealth, what are we doing? What are we doing? What have we been doing? You know, so it really, the education, our children need to figure out how to make this land work for us.
Right.
Okay? How now we can.
If you have family property, keep it in the family some way. Even if you have to rent it for income, because that's what we're fighting for, right? So that's a really big deal to me. And I want to talk a little bit before we leave. I want to talk about people with special needs and children with special needs and understanding those kids. I had a child that came, and the little boy he had some autism. He was on the spectrum, but he was functional. And he did something bad in school one time the year before, and the teachers continuously called the family in and complained about his behavior. So they just called him, "You're bad, you're bad. If you hit someone, you're going to jail." So I was able to sit in one of the family meetings on the day that I was his nurse. I said, "Wait a minute. He's trying to defend himself." I had a conversation with the child. Everybody thinks he's bad, so the bullies are going to pick on him. So when he defends himself, he becomes the bad guy. But have we ever had him tested? Have we ever had him to find out where he needs to be? Is he in the proper classrooms? While we're leaving him with somebody who's having all of these problems? And sometimes that made me begin to think that parents, some parents don't understand their children and their special needs when they're in school.
Right.
And we can't just label them as bad. Can we talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, well, this is again about us showing up, as a community, because again, the conversations have always been about how children fit into that public school space, and if you're a child advocate and we're talking about school choice, the conversation doesn't surround the mode of education, the conversation surrounds the child. Because for some children, and for what we've seen in broken systems, they don't always serve those students that need the best. Okay, so most times our children with special needs don't always get the best service in the biggest systems. Okay, so again, when we talk about school choice, we have to look at all those possible ways that children, even those who live with autism, can get their education. And if you look at the data across any data sets for children, the hardest educational environments for children are public school environments. Because again, with some of their challenges and their needs, smaller schools, more specialized care and needs, and things that public school may not be able to offer that child on a long-term basis may be the best mode for them. So as an informed parent, that parent needs to have a broader mindset. Okay, it's kind of like one of those, I went to the ocean with a small cup and dipped it in and I saw no whales, so there's no whales in the ocean. So no, if you have a child with special needs, you need to be globally educated about all types of strategies, modes of, support, community supports, what, educational options that you need to have. Public school should not be your first conversation. So again, this is breaking that narrative that just because public school is the largest, that every conversation needs to be surrounded or about public school. It's not. There's data that shows that Ivy League schools most times don't take public school students. So even though we think public school is our only mode of, there's a correlation to very few of our black and brown kids getting to Ivy League schools that come through that public school mode. Most of them are in private schools. Most of them have these huge portfolios of volunteer work and internships, and those are things that public school may not be able to give. So again, informed, engaged, and dedicated parents need to look at, where do I want my child? What does their future look like educationally? So if the parents decide, look, we want to have a student that goes to this huge HBCU and we're looking at creating a class of doctors in our progeny, and, this is what we got to do to map out that, most times the public school of the neighborhood is not necessarily going to be, your, best choice. Or if that is your choice, because My child went to a public school and she got a doctorate. It took a lot of support, making sure that I was there talking to teachers, showing up at events, going to the orchestra, knowing who the teachers are, helping her look at AP classes. Do we want to do this? Do we want to do that? Whatever choice that families make, you got to be on it the whole time. It's not one of those, I show up 2 times at the school the whole year. It's one of those, have I been there twice a month? Have I emailed the teacher this week? This is now the call to action that, is a little jolt. That's that hard right turn we just made in this administration. And I hope it woke parents up. Because if you ain't going to your child's school at least twice a month, you let 20-something days of instruction go by and you don't know what your child is doing. You just think they're safe in a building because you went to work that day. But what actually? Because again, the further conversation is the changes we're seeing now of defunding in certain areas. We're also seeing legislation change, and there's going to be changes in the modes and type of instruction. There's some conversation in other states about pushing the 10 Commandments and Bible verses there. So what happens? That sounds good. What happens when it's not your choice of religion that's being pushed in a public school? So where we have separated that church and state, now we have those who have an idea of their type of church. Because if you're a Christian, you may have an evangel, a Presbyterian, a Catholic. Who gets to choose? I grew up in a Baptist church, and if the Catholics were ruling, we were ruling of the day of Catholicism, so who makes that choice? So those are slippery slopes that we take if we're not paying attention. Okay, so we need to be informed. So again, if your child is going to stay in, you need to show up at that board meeting, because in that Texas school system, that's going to be discussed at a board meeting on what's going to change, and what type of conversations can teachers have, and them now certifying that there's no longer any DEI. So that may mean we don't get to talk about Dr. King in public schools anymore. We don't know. This is why you guys have to show up. We don't know what this debacle, this error, whichever one you want to put it, is putting us, where it's going to go. But you got to follow this dumpster fire, because your babies are in that dumpster. So if you want to know what's going on, you best be all things public school, or start getting your education about private schools, or started getting your programs and education about homeschooling. So whatever it is, you need to now get your PhD on what my baby's futures need to look like. And it's okay. The other part is a shift now for parents, as if parents don't have enough to do. Now I have to shift the narrative and figure out an alternate future for my baby. Yeah. Guess what? We just did it. We just survived COVID. We went into COVID in March in 2020 with uncertainty. And it was, when I say the anxiety that people had, we heard it through our nonprofit. People don't like change. Change causes disruptions. It causes uncertainty, things that we're not intentional with, and things that are forced on us, like what's going on right now. We are resilient people. As humans, we are resilient when we lean on each other for support. Okay, we're not here on this planet with 8 billion of us for no reason. We are not individuals. This is now making us lean on each other. And this is how we got through COVID. We got through resilient. But guess what we started doing? We started feeding people. People started baking cookies and dancing, and it brought our humanness back, is what it did. The fear caused us to latch out for other humans. And through that connection, we survived it. So I look at this as the same way. I see a pandemic in the White House right now. We've got 4 years to get out of it. Actually, we can get a 1-up by next year to come out of this dumpster fire. But people got to wake up. You can't be over here talking about drinking bleach and doing all kind of crazy stuff. I'm just going to do this and I'm going to do. No, ain't no way around it. You got to get through it. Your children are dependent on you to smarten up, and to get a clue, because gone are the days of letting other people do it. That's the end of it. Ship sails, gone. It's gone. Get over it. We need everybody to be well versed on what DOE has on their website right now. We need you to know what your babies have for the next, was about 6 weeks after spring break that kids have left in school. Know what they have to do. With a lot of high schoolers, they're coming up on, end of the year tests and exit exams. Do you know what your child's graduation test looks like? Do you know what the I think ELTC, or the exit exam for high schoolers? Do you know what that looks like for your child? Does your child have any supports in place? IEPs that they may need to make sure are there, while they take their exams. Parents, yeah, we got work to do. A lot more work. A lot more work. But trust me when I say, and this is from an OG parent, I've got 5 Purple Hearts. I've been in this game for a minute. We put out 5 of them. We're working on this next generation. It will pay off. It will. When I look at my children, we put a lot of work into our children's future and their education. And they did that. When I say they did that, I like to brag on all that they did, but all that we put into them. But they did that. And when you give them that support, you will be so surprised and proud of your children on how far they can excel. Okay, so we need to get out of this mindset that we need to back off. And I'll say this as a PTA president of a high school where parents don't think they're supposed to show up because they're grown. They're not grown. They're not grown. As a matter of fact, at that point where children are coming into adulthood is where they need the supports of the elders the most to make that transition. Yes. So we need to, yes, I'm glad he said what he said. Yeah, parents, come get your babies. Come on, let's come on, get your babies, figure everything out together, make the connections, get support, because this is not an isolated conversation. Now it's time to actuate that phrase, it takes a village. Okay, he said, come get your babies. We're saying the village is here. We're ready. We're ready.
Yes. Yeah, that's so beautiful. Okay. This is, I'm just so happy about tonight. This is really good. Could you leave it with, say what you're gonna leave us with, and if you would like to give information if a parent needs something, some place that they can contact or contact you if they need any help or support and transitioning.
Sure. Every family needs to make sure they have some supports in place, whether regardless of the mode that your child receives education. If you are not a part of any type of support groups, join one. If you need to find one or want to talk to communities that support, please reach out to our nonprofit. It's Mental Health Support Network .support. You can reach out to me directly. My phone number is 678-499-3466 or Astrid Ross 13 at gmail.com. Again, you are not in this alone. You are not in this alone. We are so sorry that this is time. And I thought about that during COVID time. Our children were all adults, and the angst that families must have had to go through COVID with young children, and now looking at a disruption and an uncertainty about their future 4 years later is a lot. It's a lot. Even the threats of it, if it hasn't happened, the conversations that are in the universe about it, our children's futures are under attack. So the first thing we need to do is to center ourselves. Same thing we talk about with mindfulness and meditation. When we talk about the anxiety of the future, the first thing we need to realize is that right now we're okay. We have what we need to get through it. Okay, reach out. There are supports in place. Don't try to think through this alone or get through it by yourself. Reach out and try to get that support. And trust me when I say, we've had communities and our grandparents have done it before. So we've got some good blueprints to look at, but know that you are not alone.
Thank you so much, Ms. Astrid, for being here this evening. You look so beautiful. I just want to say that. Let me hear that. Thank you very much. And I'm so glad that you were here. And I'm going to deliberately put this, because this is like the most important talk we're going to have at this time. So I just want to thank you for this information. we needed this conversation to save our world and to save our children's world.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.